Welcome to the Get Real with King Arthur show, and I have my crown. Last week I was home recovering from the virus and talked about the COVID, which I had picked up on an airplane with a few comments on it. And so I'm back to talking philosophy, and I don't think that the Queen is too amused by this, and I hope I'm not giving answers to questions you don't have. But anyway, I'm talking about how I was alienated from philosophy from college and how it hit me through rhetoric, since I teach English and whatnot. And one thing that hit me was I didn't like the abstract search for certain knowledge, especially the logical positivists, as represented by Bertrand Russell. Now, I think a lot of people are stuck with logical positivism. It's minimalist. We're all made of tiny atoms, and everything that develops from these tiny atoms, they add and complement each other. And they also looked for a language which would be exact to represent scientific findings. Well, both of those proved to be wrong, I believe. I don't believe we're more than just tiny atoms. And I know there's no artificial language which can represent reality in some certain way. So later, philosophy took another bent. And rather than being bent on trying to find absolute truth, they were more interested in philosophy for living. That's what appealed to me. So I found out from especially Martin Heidegger that philosophy talks about how I look at the world. And I look at the world from the angle of the broken hammer. As I see the world, I see things that I need, but I don't pay attention to them till they don't work. I don't know what an alternator is, but until I have a car and it doesn't work and I get a bill to replace it, I will never know what an alternator is. So it makes sort of common sense that the world, which he calls design, is influenced by my being, which he called sign. Those are German terms. So I said, I think that we start our thinking with the broken hammer. And I talked about all communication, didn't I? Starts with the belief that the listener or the reader, something is wrong with him or her. Really? Yes. In other words, he does not act the way he should be. She doesn't have the right attitude the way she ought to, or he doesn't know something that you think he ought to know. And so every time you communicate, you are putting the reader, listener, kind of in the wrong. Advice. Some people are tired of advice. I am prone to give advice, as I already said. And so be careful when you give advice, knowing that you are putting the hearer or reader in an inferior position. No, you don't say that, But here I'm putting you in an inferior position. I think you ought to know about a few basic things about philosophy, see? And every time you read a newspaper, you assume that the writer assumes that you need to know some information that you do not know. Now that's important because every time you write, every time you communicate, friends, I'm talking about reality. You are putting the hearer and the reader in the wrong a little bit. Now, how do you proceed from that? I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And there are about 5 movements, I think, every time you communicate, you go through. It's like a dynamo, friends. And the first thing that happens is you say, here's a standard. You fall short of this standard. And you rub those two together. Kenneth Burke, the rhetorician, said we're rotten with perfection. We can't stand to be wrong. And so the first thing you need to do is kind of smooth the poor reader. You've offended him or her. And you do that by saying, look, you kind of excuse him. You can't know everything, I mean, just because you don't know philosophy, well, why, really? So that's the first level. Or you say, well, you should have studied it. What did you do in college? Sleep in class? That's another level. Or you could say, you've just been careless you're not serious about life. And the lowest level, never go there, is malice. You deliberately don't want to know or do what's right. Never go there. So now I'm taking you through how you communicate, am I not? Isn't that practical? I think it is. Let me know. And tell me that I am boring you, or non comprendo. Well, whatever. And I hope you have a good week. And I will talk a little more about it until you get blame tired of my lecturing on this subject.